All right. I am so excited to have Brian Proctor on the Ignite Her Mind podcast today. So, Brian, huge welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Julie. I'm really glad to be here. This is a nice platform to be on here with you.
It's such an honor. And, it's funny. I always tell the podcast is 5 years old, and we have only had, I can count on one hand how many men we've had on the podcast. We're at like almost 400 episodes. So it's to us, it's very, very special when we have a guy on this podcast. He's a special guy. So we're really, really honored that you're here with us today. You have a huge following of women who absolutely not only adored your dad, but his lessons have had a huge impact. We call them generational shifts in my audience. And I know you even talk about that in your book, about it being 4 generations deep now of shifts.
That's right.
We feel that. And so I can't think of a better audience to talk about this new book that you have out and some of the things that we're going to chat about today. So again, huge thank you for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you, Julie. I'm honored to be here.
So let's talk about this book. So I have it right here. I told you, it's hot off the presses. So I'm not even totally through it yet, but I literally want to like stop everything I'm doing and just sit down and read the whole thing. But I do have 3 kids and it's summer and I have a business, but I am like so excited to get to spend some more time reading it. But it's called My Father Knew the Secret, Growing Up with Bob Proctor. Can you talk a little bit about, where the idea for this book came? I think you started, if I read that correctly, you started writing this book a while ago, well before I think even your dad had gotten sick. Is that correct? So kind of what kind of prompted the book? What was your idea for it? And what did you hope would be the result of putting this together?
Well, you know what, Julie? It's the number one question I always got at our seminars and events was, what's it like being Bob Proctor's son? And that was just, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question. And I guess 4 years ago, roughly, my wife, Corey, and I, we were chatting, and she said, you should write a book about, what's it like being Bob's son? Everybody keeps asking you that question. Obviously, there's some interest around it. So I thought that was a good idea. And so I started writing, and I would talk to Dad about it. And he knew I was writing the book. I didn't know what the title was at the time, but he knew I was writing the book. And I just thought, what a great vehicle to share the message of what Bob Proctor's like, more on a personal level, rather than just the business person, Bob Proctor, the speaker that everybody knows. I was going to share a viewpoint of what Bob is like as a father, as a friend, just a really different and unique experience. So I started writing that, and we would talk about it often. It was actually a lot of fun. I think he enjoyed that I was doing this, and I'd bounce ideas off of him, and I'd ask him questions about things in our past and why we did this or that, and it all kind of ended up in these pages. I had notes and notes and notes that I would take when I was at seminars. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many seminars I've been at. I've been going to them ever since I was a young boy. I can remember being at some of his very first seminars. I was so young that they'd go into the evening. I would crawl under the table and go to sleep. I mean, that's how long I've been going to these. So anyways, I just thought this is a great vehicle to really help carry on his message. After he passed away, it took me a little bit to get back into writing it. It was obviously a lot tougher. I expected he would be here for when I came out with a book, but that didn't happen. And one of the things Dad said to me at the end, he says, Brian, just keep talking to me. Always talk to me. Like, he knew he was going, and I have to be careful I don't get too emotional around this, but we just had some really, really deep conversations. And so I've continued to speak to him. And he says, his answer will come in, it'll just come into my head as intuition, whatever we want to call that. And everybody has different beliefs around that, but I believe through my intuition, I hear his answers and his voice. And So, I've carried on these conversations. Well, the crazy thing is I woke up in the middle of the night one night, I don't know, probably 5 months ago, um, with such a revelation for the title of the book. Um, I just had this thing. It hit me in the middle of the night. I'm sure I just feel it was my father. Anyways, so that's why I called the book "My Father Knew the Secret," growing up with Bob Proctor. I thought, the movie The Secret really propelled him onto a much larger stage. And I really feel he did know the secret. He had gems that he taught that changed lives everywhere. I mean, he changed my life dramatically. But I know through the programs, I've seen so many other people and what's happened to them. So that kind of came to me in the middle of the night. I actually got up and wrote it down because I wanted to make sure it was clear and there. And that's really kind of how the book came to be.
Oh my God. And I just love that's like that he even had a say, right? Like up until the end there with the book. That is amazing. And you know what I thought too when I saw the title? Definitely, obviously the movie,
Mhm.
but he would always talk about the secret inside of Think and Grow Rich.
That's
And
right.
if you can find the secret in there, right? That you and it, so it was so perfect. When I saw the title, I was like, yes, that was the perfect title. It's so
Yeah.
good. And he did know the secret. And it's so interesting. I think the thing that I just is so impressive. I mean, there's so much that's so impressive. But the fact that he really birthed the personal development industry as we know it today.
Mhm.
And the thing I can remember him saying too about listening to Earl Nightingale on the record player, on the portable record player in his car. We just live in such a different time where we can literally take these lessons that he's put together that you've shared now in this book as well. And we can listen to them on repeat, but we have so many ways that we can do that. We can read your book. We can still listen to him. I was laughing when you said that you were at the seminars, since you were little. I listen to one of the Born Rich seminars
Oh yeah.
on
Yeah.
Audible with that funky 80s music to it, right? It's like the funniest thing, right? Like Born Rich. And I listen to it all the time. And actually he mentioned your name literally yesterday when I was listening to it. And I go back to it all the time. And I just think about what it must have been like for him paving that path. I don't really think there was really anyone else doing
No.
it the way that he was doing it, all those countries, all those seminars before we had, the internet and all the things that we have today. I mean, that had been pretty amazing growing up with Bob leading that industry. Can you give some perspective on that?
Yeah, it really was. And I think that was part of the magic of my father. His sheer persistence in delivering this message is beyond anything I've ever seen. As you said, he was teaching in the 60s and 70s when personal development was not a big deal and it was not very popular. It was hard for him to even get an audience. And it took many, many years before he became anything of scale because people just weren't into self-development the way that they are today. But he had seen such change in his life that he just persisted. He knew what he had was important, and he knew that the message he had would change lives if he could just get people to listen. And so, I got to witness his basic start from the very beginning through till the end, where he was at the very elite level of self-development. It was pretty cool. And I do talk about a little bit about that in the book because his persistence through the tough times, where most people would have quit and found something else to do, he just knew that he had to do this. This was his calling. And nothing deterred him. If there's one thing I can share with everybody that's watching or listening to this, is that you have a goal, you have something you're really going after, you just got to keep going at it. Don't let the naysayers take you off course. And he had a lot of naysayers, and especially in the beginning. And I do talk about that in the book. And he would distance himself from those people because they weren't helping him get to where he wanted to go. And he was so focused on it and just kept at it. And look what happened. He ended up with just a magnificent life and doing exactly what he wanted to do. And it's that power of persistence. It's something pretty strong.
It's amazing. And I think I was actually really surprised when I was, again, as far as I'm into the book, reading that he was 72 when The Secret, the movie, came out. I did not realize that. And it just, again, it shows you, right? Like all of the success that obviously he had up until that point. But at 72, that is when he really became almost a household name at 72. And I just thought I really wanted the listeners to hear that and to read more about it and that in the book, because that is persistence. It's the sticking with his mission, his message, and and knowing, I think, what was it that that he was going to be in every country in the world, and he had that for so long. And but at 72, that's when that really started to fully take off. And I think that's so worth noting, because we live in a time where we expect everything to happen fast,
Yeah, right.
overnight. We see
Yeah.
everyone else, like, oh, the success. But that is such a beautiful story of sticking with the message, sticking with his mission, and then like that, almost that harvest
Mhm.
that ended up happening with The Secret, really propelling him to a household name. However, I think what's so fascinating, I'd love some of your perspective on this too, is whether I listened to him back in that 1980 something seminar, or literally, I think he was doing a 5-day masterclass,
Mhm.
like really up until the end. I mean, with the same message.
Yeah.
His consistency and conviction in what he showed, it didn't change, it didn't oscillate. It got deeper, I think, through all of his study and all the work that he did. But wow, I mean, that is a feat in and of itself, this day and age, to be so strong on a consistent message that actually can change lives. I think that really stood out to me as well.
Yeah, that's always hit me, Julie. It's, his just power in the message, and it never changed. He knew what worked for him, what caused his life to change, and he was committed to deliver that message. And that message really did not change over the years. Sure, it might have altered a little bit with what he was studying, but it was always the same message. I mean, I was in that audience of that 1988, I think it was filmed, that Born Rich seminar. And it's always fun for me watching that, just seeing him, with his red hair. And a lot of people never saw him in the early days, but his message is identical to what it was 2 years ago. It never changed. And that when The Secret came out, that really propelled him to a larger stage. He often said he was an overnight success that took 50 some years, but that is a testament to persistence. My gosh, to just keep at it for as long as he did. And he reaped the rewards because he did.
And I think too, like, when you think about, sometimes when people like the movie The Secret, it seems like it basically just became an amplifier for
Yes,
him to the same message he always had. And I think that's what's so cool. It's not like, he all of a sudden became a household name, all of a sudden, but, at 72 became a household name, and, it changed anything. It just became an amplifier for the
right,
same exact message, if he was in a room full of a couple of hundred people.
right.
And I really want the listeners to hear that, because we have a lot of women who are listening, who are coaches, and they're trying to help people, with a message that they have. And what happens is that we're always trying to like change and shift our message, or we think that if we say the same things over and over again, we're going to bore our audience, or, I got to come up with something new content, new. But I can tell you the fact that I can listen to Bob and his lessons, and now in reading your book forever, like,
Mhm.
the fact that it doesn't change is what's so important. And I think that one of the biggest like things that shifted for me, I mean, a lot of things in studying with Bob, but this idea of repetition
Mhm.
and study, and repetitively studying the same things over and over again. I had never done that.
Mhm.
From the time, you're in school, it's like you kind of you learn, you memorize, you move on to the next thing, and you go, and then it's the next. And I'd look at my bookshelf of like every personal development book under the sun, and really, would anything change? Not
Mhm.
really. He was the first person I ever heard say, "You don't read a book once and put it on the shelf. You study that book." And that one concept has changed things dramatically for me and a lot of my listeners. Like, I'm sure that I've never heard anyone else say that, to be honest with you. I feel like he's like the only person that has really said that. And it's probably one of the most powerful things that we can do, so that we actually start to embody what we're reading.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Julie, here's the interesting thing. I mean, I think I can very safely say I have seen more seminars of my father than just about anybody else on this planet. And yes, his stories, his what he talked was always the same. But here's the cool thing is I still enjoyed listening to everything he said, even though I'd heard it thousands of times. And the reason for that was, and this is for the women on here that you've talked about that are coaching, never worry about repeating, because what I found and what Dad always taught was that when you hear it again, you're hearing it from a different place. You're in a different place. So if you have coaches that are teaching something, who you're coaching is going to be at a different place, even a week from now. And what they hear, they'll look at it from a different viewpoint, and they'll take it from a different way. And he always said, repetition is what's going to make a difference. That's how we form new habits that are going to cause us to be more successful. You talk about the book. I can tell you, I held it. I was up in Toronto just a week and a half ago, visiting with my family, and I stayed at Dad and Linda's house. Linda's my father's wife, and Linda has Dad's book, the Think and Grow Rich book, that I'm sure a lot of people have seen him holding. And that book, God, when I held it when I was up there, it was just, I could feel him. But here's the cool thing, Julie, that book was held together with a big rubber band. And when you take that rubber band off and open it up, it would fall apart. Like, you had to be careful looking at it and holding it. And the reason why it was like that was because my father studied that book every single day for 60 years. It's crazy. He had a lot of people want to get it rebound, get it redone, try to give him a new book. He would never take it. And he never wanted that book fixed because it was his book. And that's what he studied. And there's something to be said for that. And boy, he lived the principles that are in Think and Grow Rich. I mean, he talk about repetition. I don't know anybody that's read a book every day for 60 years. So you can only imagine what that did for his whole being.
And I think what was, so interesting is I remember when I was leaving IBM, becoming an entrepreneur, and someone had said to me, "Oh, well, you got to read Think and Grow Rich." I'm like, "I've never heard of Think and Grow Rich," like, okay. And so I tried to read it, and I was like, "Oh, this is so boring." I remember I like put it back up on the shelf. And then when I started to like study with Bob and learn from Bob, I of course pulled it back off the shelf, and I just read it in a totally different
Mhm.
light, to where now it's definitely it's a guide. It's literally a guide for success. And it's amazing how one of the things that I just think was such a gift, and honestly, I see it in the book
Mhm.
that you've written as well, is I think you've got the same gift, which is to be able to take complex topics and bring them into a way that people can hear it, because we have to be in a place where we can hear it. So when someone first gave me that Think and Grow Rich book, I'm like, okay, this, I don't even understand what's happening here. This is really boring. I don't really want to hear about Thomas Edison and what I just put it back. I didn't like even listen to it. I read it. But Bob, the way he would talk about it, it would just make so much sense. And that's a gift, because people need to be in a position and to be able to hear so that they can change versus to shut things out. And I think that there are a lot of amazing, very, very incredible leaders in the personal development industry, even now, but sometimes they're talking so far beyond where most people are. And I
Mhm.
think that that's what really drew me to Bob, was that it was personal development for everyone. And that is such a gift. And that's how I feel as I started to read your book. Like, this is for everyone. Even if you're listening to this, and which would be really rare if you've been listening to this podcast and you don't know who Bob Proctor is, or you haven't started studying any of his lessons. But get the book, because I think what's so powerful is that it can really impact you no matter where you are in your growth and in your development. And also, I think from a generational standpoint, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. So
Mhm.
he's your dad, and you just talked about being at all those seminars and listening to all of the messages over and over again. And it's also something that you've worked to share with your daughter, correct, as well. And so one of the questions one of my listeners had was like, as we go through some of this growth and this personal development, and we're like, drinking it in,
Mhm.
how do we then turn and talk with our kids or bring this through with our children? Because they tend to like roll their eyes at us, or they think that we're crazy, or like, okay, mom, like a mom's the life coach, all right. Like, if you could give us a little perspective, both from your as son and then as father, where when did you like really start like seeing that, wow, like my dad's got like a pretty amazing message, versus like, oh, this is just my dad's work and I go sleep under tables, right?
Mhm.
And then also, how did you bring this in with your daughter? And when did that how did that affect her? I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, Julie, here's what I learned from dad. The big thing is he always said you need to be able to deliver a message in a simple form that anybody will really understand. He said people that try to complicate things, they're not doing anybody any good. So dad was always like that. So I wrote the book in that way. When Linda, my dad's wife, when she read the book, she loved it, and she said to me, she says, Brian, you have the same gift as your father. You've got the stories, and you've done it in a way that everybody can read and understand. And that's really what I did. What I learned from dad, and why I followed him and always did well with it, was dad never taught at me. And that's the big thing with when you have kids. You never want to teach at them, because they're going to like, whoa, they're going to repel that message. Dad always taught me through stories. He would teach through stories, and would talk about empowering things, and teach in that way, and that resonated with me. When I was a kid, I'll tell you a story, and then I'll bring in how I work this with my daughter, Leanne. When I was a young boy, one of my earliest memories of my father was him tucking me into bed at night. Um, every night when he was home, he would tuck me into bed. And I'm sure he did. I've never really talked to my brother and sister about it. I'm sure he did the same thing with them, but I have my memory, and this is what it is. And every night when he would tuck me in, he would put his hand on my chest, and he would start to talk about all the good things that were happening for me, and talk about my day and the good in the day. and he would reinforce the positive. And if there was anything negative, he would switch it around and start to show why that could be a positive. And he did that with me every night. It was pretty amazing. And then when he was finished talking, he would still be having his hand on me, and it was just that connection, you know. And he would say, Brian, you are capable of being, doing, or having anything you want in this world. When you're going to have a great sleep tonight, and when you wake up in the morning, you're going to feel wonderful with a big smile on your face. It's just that I can still feel that, you know. I'm 61 years old now. So, I mean, that was a long time ago. The power in that. Well, when I had kids, I started doing the same thing with my kids. And what I did with the kids was I did a slightly different form of it. I told them stories when I would tuck them in, and I would hold them and I would tell them stories, and I would make them a superhero in the story. And I was just building their self-image. That's really what I was doing. And, you know, I never had issues with my kids. Went through teenage years and all that, never had trouble. They're always great. But I never taught at my kids. I think that was the big thing. You know, so often we try to do that and you instantly will meet a wall. And so, you know, I always did it through storytelling. And that worked for me. You know, my daughter, Leanne, she is 31 now. I'll never forget, she was 14 years old and we were talking about goals. And I was talking about, you know, I was telling stories, and I said, you know, one of the things I always impressed on Leanne when she was really young, I said to her, honey, you never need to rely on a man to get anywhere you want in this world. I don't think enough women are taught that. And I don't know what caused me to do that with her, but I just thought I never want her to have to rely on a man for anything. And I did it in a way that obviously resonated with her. And we started talking, what would you really like? What do you want? You know, my dad always was, you know, what do you want? And get me focused on a goal. Because if you have a worthy goal that you're going after, you're going to do things in a day that you wouldn't normally do. Well, Leanne at 14, she wanted to own her own house when she was old enough. And I mean, I don't know many 14-year-old kids that think I want my own home and I want to be able to pay for it on my own. Well, she did. And at 14, her goal was to get her own house. And she got into modeling and she started doing that. She never got on that bad track of modeling where, you know, some of the negative stuff. She was always positive. She got more jobs because of the way she was. She was positive. She treated everybody well around her. And what she did with her money was she just saved it like crazy. She did nothing with it. She saved it and invested it. And I think she was 23 when she bought her house. And she owns a beautiful house just outside of Toronto that's worth a fair bit of money. And, you know, it was because she had a goal, she was focused on it, and she was empowered to do it on her own. She didn't have to rely. Now, she is very happily married to a wonderful guy. I mean, I couldn't pick a better guy for her. And she has 2 children now. So she's at home raising her kids. And she's living a great life, and she's treating her kids the same way. I watch her and I think, what a wonderful mother she is, the way she teaches her kids, and she's teaching her kids through stories. So it's kind of fun to watch how that just, you know, keeps on going. And I have my father to thank for all of that all the way down.
And it's amazing because it sounds like, you know, he didn't necessarily have that, but he started it. And now it's like can continue on, you know, for forever. And when you were just talking about Leanne and how she would get the jobs and people wanted to work with her, impression of increase sounds like she took that lesson to heart, and you know how she treated people. I just love that. You'll appreciate this. So my son Jack, I have 3 kids. My son Jack is my middle son. He's going to be 18.
Mhm.
And several years ago when I started to study more with Bob, he was very interested. And so he actually went through some of Bob's lessons, and he started reading Think and Grow Rich. and he had, his pen and he was highlighting things and all this stuff. And his worthy goal was that he had never played football in his life, American football, always been a soccer player. And his end of his sophomore year of high school, it was during COVID, they moved the season to the spring, which never happens. And the football coach, because my son's very tall, he's like 6'4", and the coach is like, "Hey, you want to just come try football?" He
Mhm.
tries football, falls in love with it. So he's starting his junior year of high school, and he says, "Mom, I want to go play in college." Now, he's never played before. So
Mhm.
his worthy goal became, "I'm going to play college football." And I just actually interviewed him for this podcast because everyone wanted to know how he did it. And so he talked about having this goal and all the things. So that's coming out soon. And he had this goal and he had it written down, just like, we all do. We follow your father. And he has a Division II scholarship to go play football this fall at Assumption University here in the United States. It's just it's amazing, right? Like what you put your mind to, but he was so maniacally focused on that worthy goal that he became a different person through that. And so I think that the goal piece as well, and you know what he said that was really impactful, and it goes back to desire and the desire chapter in Think and Grow Rich,
Mhm.
is that he said it had to be his desire, right? And so he said to the audience, he said, "So if you're listening," he said, "it can't be your desire for your kids. It has to be their desire."
That's
And I
right.
love that you shared that about Leanne. Like it was her desire to have her own home. It wasn't your desire for her. It was her desire. And when you have that desire, that's like, just like Bob would say, like Randy would say, it goes into the subconscious and it locks in. And that's the key. It's got to be their desire. And we can tell them stories and it can help them. And then they've got to take it from there. It's got to be their desire. That's such a good story. I love
Yeah,
that
you
so
know what?
much.
He always said, you can motivate people with fear and they'll step out and do things for a period of time, but usually not that long. But if you get somebody excited about an idea, some worthy ideal, some goal that's like, wow, I would love this. If you can get them anchored onto that, boy, they will do anything to make it happen. And that's the key for all of us. If I can think back to my own life. Anytime I never had a goal, I was just drifting. I think all of us can think of times when we didn't have a goal. We're just drifting. But every time I had a goal that I was really tapped into, boy, I would step out and do things that I would normally never have done. That's probably one of the big things I learned from Dad. It was always, you got to have a goal. If you have a goal, you're gonna do those things. You'll be different. And makes all the difference in the world. And it's got to be something that excites you, and that you don't have a clue how you're actually going to pull it off. If you know how to pull it off, you're going to fall off the wagon on that one pretty quick. But if it excites you and you don't even know how you're going to do it, but you just got to step out and start working towards it, boy, your life will change in such amazing ways.
Totally. I think I remember him saying something along the lines of, if you know exactly how to get it done, it's just a plan. It's
Right.
not a goal. It's not going to transform you. And I think that the idea of impossible, like if it feels impossible, perfect. That's what's going to help you become who you need to become to actually make that goal a reality. It's so good. I literally could talk to you all day, but I know that you also, you have probably have other podcasts and things to do to promote the book. I do have one other question for you. So you said something in the book that nothing was more important to your dad than sharing his message. And we just talked about how important that message was and how consistent that message was, and literally reached every country around the globe, which is pretty phenomenal. What Obviously your book, I want everyone listening to go and get the book, and we'll drop all the links to all the things. You've got some cool extras and bonuses, if they get the book and go through the link that we'll put below. But what would you envision? How can each of us help to share his message? How can we keep this message going, forward?
Well, you know what, Julie, it's going to come back to my goal, I guess, at right now. I had a conversation with a publisher probably 3 or 4 months ago, and they asked me how many books I thought I was going to sell. And I gave a pretty big number. And I said, my plan is to sell initially 100,000 copies of the book in the first month. Well, she looked at me like I was crazy. She said, you know, that doesn't happen in the publishing world very often. And I looked back at her and I thought, you're not for me, you know, because I know this is going to happen. And so, you know, my goal is for this first month to sell over 100,000 copies of the book. I think it's doable. And I believe that once that happens, it's going to start taking on a life of its own and will go viral and will sell a lot more. My wanting for that is not financial. I'm sure you know, you don't get rich on selling books. You just don't. You know, the Amazons and everybody else, they make more money on that than anybody else. But it's important for me because I'm sharing a message that I'm in love with. You know, I've said that this book isn't about me. It's about my father, and it is about everything I learned from Dad. And I know that whoever picks up this book and reads it, you're going to get some real value out of it, because it's everything that my father distilled into me over my lifetime. And it's pretty amazing. And I guess my ask would be that obviously you get a copy of the book, because I know it will change your life. You'll be able to open that book anywhere. You'll be able to read a story, and then you'll see some of these consider points on how you can apply it in your life, and it can change your day. So my ask would be that if you resonate with a book, which I really truly hope you will, that you buy some copies for friends and family and share it with them. They don't need to know who Bob Proctor was to enjoy this book. The lessons in the book are universal, and they are life altering. You will live such a better life if you do some of the things that are told in this book. So that would be my ask, Julie. I think if everybody gets a copy of the book, really reads it, I know you're going to resonate with it, and then buy some copies and share it with your friends and family. Because
I
you
love that.
your
So
life in a
I
different
would
way.
say, oh, I'm so sorry. I was gonna say to my listeners, like so when you're buying one, buy two at the same time and give it to a friend so you can study at the same time. So that will help too. And also what I think would be fun to do is when you get your copy of the book, I want you guys to take a picture of yourself with the book and then post it to stories on Instagram. You can tag Brian, you can tag me. We'll reshare your post too. Let's get this out there, because you know what? I love that, you know, it's available now. We're going to do I want to do a big push around your dad's birthday, right? July 5th. So everyone get the book, take pictures. Let's get this going, because we need this message in more people's hands. And I really do believe that, you know, people love stories, people love to read memoirs, people love to, you know, which that's why I love this book. It serves that purpose at the same time of delivering the lessons. So it's enjoyable, it's entertaining, it's so such a beautiful story and such powerful lessons. So definitely share it, tag us, we'll reshare, and let's definitely help Ryan with that goal. I think that's a very worthy goal, and absolutely one that I think is more than attainable, because you're promoting it in such a beautiful energy, and it's such an important book to get out into the world. So it means it's going to have to. It's
Right.
going
That's
to. I
right.
have no doubt. Well,
Well, I
thank
sure
you so
appreciate
much
your
for
help,
taking
Julie.
it.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
and thank you. Thank you for being here. And any last words you want to share?
I just want to say thank you. And thank you to everybody that's listened. You know, I hope you enjoy the book, and I hope you actually go out and practice some of the lessons, because if you do, your life will change. You know, my father was a very special man, and he's got a great message. And I think this shares it in a really unique way that everybody will benefit from. So thank you very much.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for being here.